A press conference room fell silent as a black female veteran confronted Donald Trump face-to-face, revealing the harsh realities of life after military service. What followed inspired a national movement and prompted America to question his leadership. The press conference was already in full swing, with reporters competing to have their questions heard. The room was lit by camera flashes, murmurs, and exchanges of glances. But then a single voice cut through the noise like a sharp blade. "Mr. Trump." The woman's voice was firm, but there was a hint of emotion she couldn't hide. Heads turned, conversations stopped, and the room fell silent as she approached. She wasn't a reporter, that much was clear. Her presence commanded attention, her military bearing, her uniform adorned with service medals, and the way she held herself erect despite the weight of her words. "I'm a veteran," she began. Her voice was unexpected. "I served this country for 12 years, and now I can't even find a job to keep a roof over my head. What would you do?" The silence that followed was agonizing. Even the cameras seemed to pause, their operators too embarrassed to focus on anything other than the scene unfolding before them. Some in the audience murmured, but no one dared speak. It was as if the weight of her question had frozen the entire room. Trump, on stage, adjusted his position. His usual confidence wavered for a brief moment. He looked at her, really looked at her, as if searching for the right answer. The seconds ticked by, each one adding tension to the audience held their breath, waiting for Trump's answer. What he would say next was the question on everyone's mind, and no one was prepared for what was to come. Trump's expression changed. His bravado and defiant tone were replaced by something more measured. He took a deep breath, gripping the sides of the podium. "What's your name?" he asked, his voice carrying a gravity that surprised even the most skeptical reporters. The woman hesitated for a moment before answering. "Daniela Carter, sir." "Well, Daniela," Trump said, pausing as if testing the weight of his own words. "Why don't you come over here?" The room erupted in chaos. Journalists scrambled to reposition their cameras, capturing every angle of this rare moment. Daniela looked uncertain, her eyes scanning the room, but Trump moved again, encouraging her to join him on stage. She took a step forward, then another, each movement deliberate, as if she were walking into unfamiliar territory. As she climbed the few steps to the stage, the room quieted again. All eyes were on her. Standing next to Trump, she looked confident and vulnerable at once, a veteran in her uniformed dignity but also a woman bearing the invisible burdens of service and struggle. Trump turned to her, microphone still in hand. "You served this country, and for that you have my respect. But let me tell you, your story is not unique. I've heard it before. Veterans who gave everything and came back with nothing. That's not fair, and it's not right. But I want to hear it from you, Daniela. Tell everyone here what's really going on." Daniela took a moment to compose herself, looking out at the sea of reporters, officers, and staff. The weight of her experiences, her sacrifices, her resilience seemed to settle in her mind. Then she began to speak. "I enlisted when I was 18, she said, her voice gaining strength as she continued. "I wanted to make a difference, to serve my country, and I did. I served in Iraq, Afghanistan, places most people wouldn't dream of going. But when I came home, I realized the struggle wasn't over. Finding work, receiving support. It was harder than anything I faced overseas. It's like once the uniform comes off, the world forgets who we are." Her words hung in the air, and for a moment, it seemed as if she had taken all the political shine off the room. She wasn't just speaking for herself. She was speaking for thousands of others like her. Trump's face remained stoic, but his eyes flashed with something. Recognition, perhaps, or the understanding that this moment was bigger than both of them. He stepped away from the microphone to respond. Trump cleared his throat, the tension palpable as he gripped the edges of the podium. His gaze moved between Daniela and the audience, his expression uncharacteristically serious. "You know, Daniela," he began, "people like you, heroes like you, are the backbone of this country. What you just said, it's a call to action. And I'll admit, the system has failed you. It's failed a lot of people. But here's what I want to do." The audience leaned forward, curiosity keeping them riveted. Trump stepped away from the podium, moving closer to Daniela. He raised his hand to her, gesturing as if the gravity of his next words were immense. "I want you to work with me," he said, his voice firm but emphatic. "You have experience that no one in this room can match. You've been out there. You've seen what's broken. I'm offering you the opportunity to help fix it." Reactions rippled across the room. Reporters glanced at each other, unsure if they had heard correctly. The camera zoomed in, capturing Daniela's surprised expression. Her mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. "I'm serious," Trump continued. "I'm pushing for better programs for veterans, but I need people like you, people who understand what's really going on, to make it work. So I'm asking you now, will you join my team and help me do something about it?" Daniela stepped back, clearly shaken. The air felt thick with anticipation. She looked at Trump, then at the audience, and finally back at him. "Are you asking me to help you?" she said, her voice thick with suspicion. "That's right," Trump replied. "Help me. Help them. We'll make sure no veteran has to go through what you went through." The room erupted in a jumble of reactions. Some cheered, others shouted skeptically among themselves. Social media was abuzz with commentary, theories, and debate as reporters scrambled to pin the moment on their news stories. Daniela took a deep breath. Her composure slowly returned. "If it means making real change for veterans like me, then yes," she said, her voice firm. "I'm in." The applause grew louder, but not everyone in the room was convinced. While some saw it as a powerful gesture of leadership, others couldn't help but question Trump's motivations. And as cameras clicked furiously, capturing the embrace between the president and the veteran, one question lingered. Was this a turning point, or just another political performance? As the press conference drew to a close, the internet was abuzz. Videos of the interaction spread across social media platforms, sparking heated debate. Some praised Trump's gesture as a powerful and unprecedented move, a testament to his commitment to veterans. Others criticized it as a calculated political stunt, questioning whether any real change would come of it. Daniela, meanwhile, found herself thrust into the spotlight. Her phone rang off the hook with calls, texts, and emails from journalists, advocacy groups, and even veterans. Some offered their support, while others expressed doubt. "Don't let him use you," wrote one message. "Make him keep his promise," said another. The next morning, Daniela sat in her modest apartment in Columbus, Ohio, watching a replay of the press conference. She still couldn't fully process what had happened. It seemed surreal that the President of the United States had invited her, a woman struggling to make ends meet, to work alongside him. But doubts lingered. Could she trust his words? Or was he just another pawn in a larger game? The news cycle only intensified. Commentators on social media dissected every detail of the event. Some criticized Daniela for accepting the offer so quickly, while others applauded her courage. "She's not just a veteran," said one commentator. "She's a symbol of resilience, of the challenges so many face after serving their country." In the days that followed, the Trump administration announced a new initiative aimed at combating unemployment among veterans. It was a high-profile plan with Daniela at the helm. Her name was now synonymous with the fight for change. She found herself on stages, speaking at rallies, and attending meetings with politicians. But it wasn't all plain sailing. Behind the scenes, she encountered resistance, bureaucracy, political conflict, and the realities of navigating a system more focused on appearances than action. And yet, Daniela persisted, determined to prove that this was not just another empty promise. 6 weeks turned into months, and Daniela's presence in Washington began to make waves. Her determination and authenticity resonated with many, cutting through the offensive nature of politics. She wasn't a politician. She was a soldier fighting a different kind of battle, one that felt as challenging as any she'd faced in the past. But the challenges piled up. Daniela quickly learned how hard it was to effect real change. She sat in on meetings with governors who offered political smiles but vague promises. Proposals to fund veterans programs dragged from committee to committee. And even as Trump publicly praised her efforts, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being used as a symbol rather than a catalyst for real reform. One evening, after another frustrating day on Capitol Hill, Daniela sat alone in her office. The weight of it all, the media scrutiny, the constant battles, the doubting smiles, it all felt unbearable. She thought of the veterans she had met since the press conference, the men and women who had shared their stories with her, looking to her as an icon of hope. Their words echoed in her mind. "Don't forget us." It was at that moment that Daniela made a decision. If the system wouldn't move, she would. She began connecting directly with organizations and advocacy outside the political machinery. Her voice became louder. Her message became clearer. Veterans deserved better. And she wouldn't stop until she got it. Her efforts began to bear fruit. A bipartisan coalition of lawmakers, inspired by her tireless advocacy, pushed through a bill to provide comprehensive job training and mental health support for veterans. Daniela was on the front lines, not as a politician, but as an advocate for a cause she believed in. When the bill finally passed, Daniela was there, surrounded by veterans who had become her family in this fight. Watching the president sign the bill into law, she felt a sense of triumph, not for herself, but for the thousands of lives it would change. Daniela's journey didn't end with the passage of the law. It was just the beginning. The law she helped create became a lifeline for thousands of veterans, providing career pathways, counseling, and support to a community that had been out of reach for too long. But her true legacy wasn't just in the legislation. It was in the movement she inspired. Veterans across the country began sharing their stories, inspired by Daniela's courage. Living rooms, community centers, and online forums filled with discussions about what more could be done. Daniela became a symbol not just of advocacy, but of what it meant to lead with authenticity and heart. Still, her journey was not without its sacrifices. The pressure and constant public scrutiny took their toll. She lost the quiet moments she had, the solidity of her own space. But whenever doubt crept in, she remembered why she had started. Every letter from a veteran thanking her, every success story shared with her, became fuel to keep pushing forward. His relationship with Trump remained complex. Publicly, he defended his work, but privately, Daniela knew that their views did not always align. She didn't hesitate to challenge him, to ask for more, even when it caused friction. "If I'm not here to challenge you," he would say during one meeting, "then I'm not doing my job." Years later, Daniela's name would be in the history books, not as a politician or celebrity, but as a leader who reminded America of its promise to those who served. His legacy lived on in every life he touched, not just through politics, but through hope. And when he finally stepped away from the spotlight, it was not to rest, but to continue his work in the field, helping veterans in his own community. For Daniela, the mission was never about fame or recognition. It was about fulfilling a promise to herself and those she fought alongside. Her story serves as an icon for anyone who feels undervalued or overlooked. It's a reminder that even in the face of challenging opportunities, one voice can illuminate change, one action can create impact, and one person can inspire a nation. As Daniela's journey became part of the national consciousness, her story began to change perspectives, not just about veterans, but about what leadership and responsibility really meant. In her, people saw the epitome of resilience and integrity, a stark contrast to the cynicism often associated with politics. Networks revisited the moment that started it all, a veteran challenging the most powerful man in the country to address a deep, personal, and systemic issue. That singular moment became a symbol of the power of people to hold leaders accountable. Schools began teaching Daniela's story in civics classes, emphasizing the importance of participation in democracy. Veterans organizations saw an increase in volunteers and funding, inspired by her tireless advocacy. Even corporations began reevaluating their own employment practices, implementing specific initiatives that targeted the programs Daniela had championed. But perhaps the most significant impact was felt in the veteran communities themselves. Her story gave them a voice, a shared identity beyond their struggles. Daniela always said, "This isn't about me, it's about all of us." And she truly believed that. She refused to let her name overshadow the collective cause she was fighting for. Her influence extended to future leaders. Young people, especially women and minorities, saw in her proof that speaking out, regardless of the risks, could lead to meaningful change. Daniela became a mentor, dedicating her time to empowering the next generation of advocates. And as time went on, the echoes of her work served as a constant reminder. Real change is measured not in headlines, but in lives transformed. Years after that press conference, Daniela's impact was undeniable. She became a household name, but more importantly, a symbol of what could happen when courage met opportunity. The programs she fought for were not limited to job training. They expanded to mental health services, housing assistance, and educational opportunities for veterans and their families. The numbers spoke for themselves. Unemployment rates among veterans dropped, and poverty among former military personnel declined significantly. Her work inspired a ripple effect across other marginalized communities. Advocates for workers' rights, racial equity, and gender equality often pointed to Daniela's story as proof that one courageous voice could illuminate systemic change. It wasn't just about veterans anymore. It was about creating a society where everyone had a fair chance. Daniela remained humble, often redirecting praise toward the people she worked with. "This isn't just my story," he said in interviews. "It's the story of every veteran who refused to give up, every defender who kept fighting, and every American who believed we could do better." At the time, Daniela wrote a best-selling memoir chronicling her journey from the military to the life-changing press conference and the years of tireless work that followed. The book didn't just tell her story. It was a call to action, challenging readers to look to their own communities and find ways to make a difference. Her legacy expanded even further when a foundation was established in her name, dedicated to supporting initiatives for veterans and other marginalized populations. Daniela led the organization for several years before returning to spend more time with her family, a quieter chapter she had achieved. On the anniversary of the press conference, a special tribute was published across the country, featuring veterans whose lives were directly impacted by her work. They spoke of hope, second chances, and the gratitude they felt for someone who never gave up on them. Daniela Carter's story became more than a moment in history. It became a portrait of how courage, persistence, and an unwavering belief in justice could transform lives and, eventually, a nation.